Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today we're zooming in on the pituitary gland. Think of it as the body's ultimate master conductor. It's absolutely fascinating when you consider the paradox here. We're talking about a tiny pea-sized gland sitting right at the base of your brain. When it's working perfectly, it quietly orchestrates almost every single endocrine function in your body. But when things go wrong, well, despite its tiny size, the systemic impact is literally massive. So we're going to systematically unpack exactly how and why this happens.
Here is our clinical DAPSA-CAM framework roadmap for today. We'll be hitting 1. Etiology and pathophysiology. 2. The mass effect. 3. Hormone excess. 4. Hormone deficiency. 5. Investigations. And finally, 6. Medical and surgical management.
All right, let's jump straight into Section 1, Etiology and Pathophysiology. So when we start looking at the root causes, the etiology of these disorders, one main culprit really stands out above the rest, and that's pituitary adenomas. Now, these are benign tumors, but they are incredibly common. Actually, from your third decade of life onwards, they account for up to 10% of all intracranial neoplasms. But, they aren't the only cause out there. We also have to watch out for traumatic or vascular events, things like Sheehan syndrome or pituitary apoplexy, along with infiltrative diseases and even iatrogenic causes like previous surgery or radiotherapy in that area.
Now, all of those causes generally lead us down one of two very distinct pathways. You can think of this as the core dichotomy of pituitary disease. Either the gland goes completely rogue and starts autonomously secreting way too much of a specific hormone, we call that hypersecretion, or the gland gets damaged, squished, or infarcted, which leads to a massive failure of hormone production. And that deficiency is known as hypopituitarism. Keeping this excess versus deficiency framework in your head is absolutely crucial for understanding everything we're about to cover. To really grasp what's happening, we have to categorize the size of these adenomas. And the magic number to remember here is 10 millimeters. An adenoma less than 10 millimeters, that's a microadenoma. If it hits 10 millimeters or larger, it's a macroadenoma. And this cutoff, it isn't just some arbitrary number, it completely flips the clinical picture. You see, a macroadenoma is large enough that it doesn't just cause hormonal chaos, it actually starts causing local, physical problems because it quite literally runs out of room inside its little bony home, the sella turcica. Which brings us to Section 2, the mass effect. Okay, so one of the most critical anatomical relationships in the entire human body happens just about 1 single centimeter above the pituitary gland. Right there sits the optic chiasm, which is exactly where your optic nerves intersect. So as a macroadenoma grows and expands upwards, it physically compresses this chiasm, and specifically, it damages the crossing nasal ganglion fibers. And that specific nerve damage translates directly into a classic textbook clinical sign, bitemporal hemianopia. Because the crossing fibers that carry visual information from the outer visual fields are being crushed, the patient effectively loses their peripheral vision on both sides. But here's what you really need to take away from this. Its onset is unbelievably insidious. Patients almost never notice it happening to them. Honestly, unless a physician takes the time to specifically test the visual fields of each eye separately, this massive red flag for a pituitary tumor will easily fly right under the radar. Moving on to Section 3, hormone excess, clinical signs. Let's start with the most common functional pituitary tumors we see, prolactinomas. These guys account for roughly 35% of all adenomas. They secrete excess prolactin, which is the hormone responsible for lactation. Because of this, the clinical presentation is super specific to the hormone. In women, we frequently see galactorrhea, amenorrhea, and infertility. In men, it often shows up as erectile dysfunction, reduced libido, and infertility. And because the symptoms in men can be a bit more subtle at first, men tend to present much later, usually when the tumor has grown large enough to cause those mass effects we just discussed.
Then we have somatotroph adenomas, which are the ones pumping out excess growth hormone. In adults, this causes a condition called acromegaly. I actually want to share a striking patient quote with you that I think perfectly humanizes just how sneaky the onset of this disease really is. Quote, "My rings don't fit, nor my old shoes, and now I've got a wonky bite." End quote. Because growth hormone is actively stimulating bone and soft tissue growth, patients go through this very gradual, slow thickening of their tissues. Their hands and feet enlarge, their jaw protrudes, which causes that poor dental occlusion or a wonky bite, and their facial features become coarse. It's crazy, but it's often family or friends looking at old photographs who notice these profound physical changes way before the patient ever does.
Our third major hypersecretion syndrome is Cushing's disease, and this one is caused by an ACTH-secreting adenoma. The excess ACTH drives the adrenal glands into overdrive, overproducing cortisol. The physical transformation here is just dramatic. Patients develop central truncal obesity, a very rounded moon face, and a specific fat deposit on the back of the neck that's known as a buffalo hump. All that chronically high cortisol also starts breaking down proteins, leading to profound proximal muscle weakness and a severe thinning of the skin. The skin gets so weak it actually tears under the pressure of the weight gain, forming these deep purple abdominal stria.
All right, Section 4, Hormone Deficiency, Hypopituitarism.
So, while a growing tumor can slowly crush the normal pituitary tissue over years and years, causing this gradual hormone loss, hypopituitarism can also strike violently and suddenly. Take Sheehan syndrome, for example. It's rare, but it's a severe necrosis of the pituitary gland caused by massive blood loss and shock during childbirth. Contrast that with pituitary apoplexy, where a pre-existing pituitary adenoma suddenly suffers an infarction and literally bleeds into itself. Apoplexy presents extremely acutely with sudden vision loss, a severe headache, and nausea. It is a true life-threatening endocrine and neurological emergency.
Now, whether the destruction is a slow burn or a sudden crash, when the anterior pituitary fails, it actually loses its hormones in a highly predictable step-by-step order. The very first to go is growth hormone. That's closely followed by the gonadotropins, FSH and LH. Third to fall off is prolactin. After that, we see the loss of TSH, which leads to hypothyroidism. And finally, last but not least, ACTH is lost, causing life-threatening adrenal insufficiency. This sweeping sequential loss across the board is what causes that profound fatigue, weight loss, and widespread dysfunction in these patients.
Section 5, Investigations and Endocrine Testing.
Okay, let's play detective. The first step in our investigation is grabbing a basal hormonal blood profile to see exactly where a patient's levels sit on a normal, average day. We're going to check prolactin, cortisol, ACTH, TSH, free T4, the gonadotropins, LH and FSH, and we'll use IGF-1 as a reliable marker for growth hormone. Once the lab work clearly points us to a pituitary source, the definitive next step for sure is getting an MRI of the pituitary. We need that imaging to accurately define the tumor, especially to see if it has intra- or supracellular extension that might be pressing on that optic chiasm.
When you're reviewing those basal labs, interpreting prolactin levels can be a little bit tricky. The thing is, lots of things can mildly elevate prolactin: pregnancy, extreme physical stress, or even medications like dopamine antagonists. But here's the catch. If you see a massive level, something above 5,000 millunits per liter, well, that is no longer just stress or a simple drug side effect. A number that astronomically high, strongly, almost definitively, points to a prolactinoma macroadenoma.
Sometimes, though, basal levels just aren't enough to give us the whole picture, because hormone secretion happens in pulses. We actually have to force the body to react. This is where dynamic testing comes in. For suspected acromegaly, we use the oral glucose tolerance test. In a healthy body, a massive spike in blood glucose naturally suppresses the pituitary's release of growth hormone down to almost zero. But if a patient has an autonomous somatotroph tumor, it completely ignores the body's signals. Despite that heavy glucose load, the tumor fails to suppress growth hormone below 1 microgram per liter, which nails down the diagnosis.
We use a really similar principle of dynamic suppression when we're hunting for Cushing syndrome. In the overnight low-dose dexamethasone suppression test, a patient takes 1 milligram of dexamethasone, which is a synthetic steroid, right at midnight. By 8 a.m. the following morning, a healthy pituitary will have sensed that artificial steroid, backed off its ACTH production, and the body's natural morning cortisol will suppress to below 50 nanomoles per liter. But in Cushing's, there is a pathological loss of that normal feedback suppression. The tumor just keeps happily pumping away, and that morning cortisol stays elevated.
Section 6. Medical and Surgical Management. Let's talk about fixing this.
What makes prolactinomas so unique among all these pituitary tumors is exactly how we treat them. Unlike almost every other intracranial mass, our first-line therapy is absolutely not surgery. It's medical management, using dopamine agonists, specifically drugs like bromocriptine or cabergoline. Remember, dopamine naturally puts the brakes on prolactin release. By giving patients these drugs, we don't just drastically reduce the prolactin secretion, which restores normal menstrual cycles and fertility, but we actually physically shrink the size of the tumor itself. It's pretty amazing.
However, for almost all of the other functional tumors, like the ones causing Cushing's disease or acromegaly, or really for any adenoma that's causing a severe mass effect on the optic chiasm, surgery is going to be the primary definitive treatment. The preferred approach these days is transsphenoidal surgery. The surgeons actually go up through the nasal cavity and the sphenoid sinus to selectively remove the adenoma. This decompresses the surrounding brain structures and ideally removes the source of the hormone excess once and for all.
But, surgery and radiation always carry risks. And primarily, that's the risk of permanent hypopituitarism. And that leaves us for the final, somewhat provocative thought to consider today. If the master gland is permanently damaged, the patient has to rely on lifelong hormone replacement pills. But can we ever truly, perfectly replicate the pituitary's exquisitely complex, minute-by-minute circadian orchestration with artificial medications? It is the ultimate ongoing challenge in the field of endocrinology, and definitely something to keep in the back of your mind as you continue exploring this space. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll see you in the next one.